Good evening, and a very warm welcome to the first of these webinars as a collaboration between the Daily Star and the British Council, looking at higher education in Bangladesh. A very warm welcome to all of you out there. If you have any questions, it would be good if you could post them in the Facebook chat, either on the Daily Star website or on the British Council site as well. I should introduce myself. My name is David Maynard, and I'm the Director for Education at the British Council in Bangladesh. Tonight, I'm joined by three guests, and together we will be looking at different aspects of quality in higher education. But first, I'd just like to look at a little bit of context. Higher education globally has been going through dramatic changes over the last decade, and that is no different in Bangladesh. A much wider demographic of people now have access to further education, and greater international collaboration has brought a more diverse perspective to education, particularly higher education. At the same time, funding governments who fund, in many cases, most or many of the higher education institutions in the country have demanded greater accountability. And universities find themselves being required to have closer alignment with the government's economic goals, which has potentially brought a greater degree of control over universities' academic freedoms. Moreover, in the past 2 years, the complete closure, at least for some time, due to the current pandemic, has brought challenges to the way in which higher education institutions in Bangladesh and around the world teach and assess their students. There has been much spoken, much written, many Facebook events around this, but today, in this ever-changing landscape, we want to explore some of how quality of higher education in Bangladesh has been impacted by recent events, and what the plans are to improve in the future. We want to recognize that the world of HE faces challenges, and many of these are present in Bangladesh. This is not about a Bangladeshi issue or challenge or opportunity. This is a global challenge. And so the types of contexts that we will be discussing here tonight are the kinds of things that are being discussed around the world. In developing countries, in more developed countries, many of the issues are the same. For our part, at the British Council, we have been collaborating and working closely with the University Grants Commission over the last few years to strengthen the teaching capacity of faculty within the higher education sector in Bangladesh. We initiated the Centers of Excellence in Teaching and Learning, or CETLs, in 6 public universities and 4 private universities around Bangladesh to act as hubs for faculty development. This is now in the process of being reviewed and updated, and in preparation for it being rolled out across the country as part of the government, the Ministry of Education, and the UGC's plans for reforms in higher education. It's an interesting and exciting time to be in Bangladesh, as there are many initiatives active in higher education and indeed in education more broadly. And so I'm lucky to be joined by 3 guests who are going to provide their perspectives today. And so I'd like to turn to our guests and introduce them. Our esteemed panel has experience of earning their PhDs abroad and will bring both Bangladeshi and international perspectives to some of the questions we're going to be looking at tonight. So my first guest is Dr. Sabitha Rahman, who's professor at the Department of Microbiology in Dhaka University. She studied immunology at the University of Strathclyde in the UK. She is also the director of the Centre for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, or the CETLS unit within Dhaka University. Needless to say, immunology is a very interesting area, particularly at the moment. So welcome, Sabitha. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening.
Secondly, I'd like to welcome Dr. Masuma Habib. She's professor at the Bangladesh Agricultural University in Mymensingh. She also studied science, technology and medicine at Imperial College in the UK, and so brings both the international and Bangladeshi perspective, as do indeed all of our speakers this evening. And finally, we're joined by Dr. Tariq, who is Associate Professor at the University of Liberal Arts in Bangladesh. He studied Educational Policy and Management from the University of Queensland in Australia. He is also the Director for the Centre of Excellence of Teaching and Learning in ULAB. So a very hearty welcome to all three of you. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening. Okay, now I'd like to open our discussion, and a reminder to our viewers and listeners this evening that if you would like to raise any questions around higher education, reform, quality, anything to do with the discussion that we're having tonight, please post your questions on the Facebook chat, either with Daily Star or with British Council. We will try to pick up some of these questions and potentially answer them this evening. If not, we'll try to get back to you at some stage later. So let's turn to our guests and some of the questions. I'd like to address this first question to all three of you, and perhaps we can start with Sabitha at first. The last 2 years have been very, very difficult for education globally, as we have seen. The pandemic has closed all provision of education in all countries around the world. Bangladesh suffered indeed some of the longest closures. But now that we are coming out of that, based on your experience, what is the one thing that you would now do differently based on your experience over the last couple of years? Sabitha, over to you for a comment there, please.
Thank you very much. Well, it is indeed an important question. As an educationist, we were lost when we had to face the COVID situation. Because as you know, Dhaka University is the best, we call the best education institute in the country. And we want to serve our students, and classroom was the most important instrument where we could talk to our students and teach them, and we could contact face to face. But now, after COVID, we have learned other means of education also. We have learned to communicate with students in online methods. Our teachers and students, we have developed these techniques and adopted these techniques. And now we are sort of ready for any other pandemic or issues when we can face and stay connected with our students, both online and in person also. But I must mention the education system we have is always face-to-face, but parallelly, we will prepare our students, like for the COVID time, we were lost because we didn't know how to prepare our students. We had to shut down the halls and hostels. So the students had to struggle to go back home. And then they had some of their parents lost their jobs. They come from different socioeconomic circumstances, but the students in Dhaka University who get admission, they're extremely brilliant. And we need to motivate our students to come in online contact, but they have their reservations, they have their challenges also, like the internet speed. But we now know how to make them aware and how to prepare them and how to face the situations like any other pandemic also.
Thanks, Sabitha. I can imagine with a university the size of Dhaka University, with the student population that you have in Dhaka University, it must have been a huge challenge to try to move things online. Just in terms of how that worked when you moved things online. Did you find that it worked as you expected, or did you come across challenges? You mentioned connectivity and various other issues, and needless to say that will be the same across the country, probably more so outside of Dhaka. What did you learn from those early experiences of trying to move online, and how have you in Dhaka University? How has Dhaka University readdressed those to improve things in the future?
Yes. Like we had to run some trainings for our faculty, but the good thing in preparedness process in COVID tenure, it was our academics. They were very enthusiastic, and the students, we had to give them a little bit of time for getting them settled in their own area where they stay. Not all of them are in Dhaka, as I was saying. So the internet problem, the internet speed was a problem, but we could arrange various training programs, online examination management systems, online teaching management. The departments came forward to train their students in their own way. The university had taken initiative to train the faculty. You know, when you were talking about the number of students, we have 38,000 plus students in Dhaka University, and our faculty members are 2,100 nearly. So in that way, each department, institutes, and faculties, they took initiative. And the Center of Excellence of Teaching Learning, we have been running continuous training programs on online exam management, online class management, and the student issues were taken care mostly by the departments themselves. And then after that, we had arranged for online exams for the students also. So we trained them how to participate in different methods of examination systems. And now that the university is open, we are practicing. It is the face-to-face class we are taking, but still we have a traditional. We have the traditional way of teaching, and we are also prepared. Like if someone misses their classes or for some reason, we are ready that we can take online classes also.
Great, thank you, and good to hear that it by and large worked. I can imagine it must have been a very large undertaking. Thanks, Sabitha. Tarek, over to you. As a member of faculty in a private university, I'm guessing there will have been some differences in the way in which ULAB, or University of Liberal Arts, approached the problems that you've faced over the last couple of years. What's the one thing that you would now do differently?
Well, thank you, David, for the question. I guess that's a kind of a difficult question because there are plenty of things now we see differently. And we, of course, do differently. But if you ask me for one thing, I would say that how we understand the communication with the student, that is a big learning, I would say, that we have learned in the COVID scenario. So previously, when we actually dealt with the students face to face, the pedagogy was different, right? Because the students are in front of you. So all the kind of communications, assessment, teaching learning strategies was very much face to face. But when we are coming back into the online system, so things actually changed. And I think the communication changed a lot because now we focus more on kind of a philosophy. So you can say that it's a change of philosophy or philosophy shift. So we deal with our students with more empathy and flexibility. And I would love to say that ULAB actually is very proud with this kind of philosophy, because when the students are actually facing difficulties, we need to understand their context, and we need to put our feet in their shoes as well to understand how things work for them, right? So now our teachers are more flexible in terms of how the assessments are done. We are trying to train our students as well. So that is one thing I would say that ULab is championing in this aspect, because when we talk about training and faculty development, yes, some of the faculties don't know about LMS, or probably they need a little bit help, but we tend to forget the students because they are also new to this LMS and the entire online assessment and everything. So what we are doing differently right now is that we are currently training our students. We are giving them some sort of um, how should I say that, the well-being facilities and the trainings as well, because people are traumatized in so many ways, right? So lots of surveys are going on at ULab to understand what are the needs, both from the faculty ends as well as the student ends, to better understand that where we need to support. And our initiatives are very much evidence based, as I said, that the surveys are going on. So, yeah, so that's how we are trying to understand better in terms of what the students and the faculties need, and we are supporting in that fashion. David.
Okay, thank you very much. Interesting to hear, and interesting that you particularly focused on student uh, well-being as well. That's clearly a big issue, and one that I know that has come up time and time again with many of the various development agencies in their reports on student well-being across education. The fact that children and young adults in higher education were at home for lengthy periods of time and disconnected from their peers in classes. Clearly a difficult one, and I think one that we may see some issues arising in future years around well-being and the impact of it, the longer ongoing impact that this pandemic may have. Finally, if I could turn to you, Masuma. Obviously, Mymensingh is not in Dhaka, unlike the other two universities that we've just spoken to. How did the agricultural university fare, and what's one thing that you would do differently based on your experiences over the last year or two?
Thank you very much, Mr. David Manner, Director Education, British Council, Bangladesh. As we know, the um, last 2 years has been very difficult for education around the world, as well as Bangladesh. Our students all around the world, they deprived a lot. Bangladesh Agriculture University decided to continue some online classes and exam along with in-person or physical classes. We are conducting our physical classes now at present. Simultaneously, some courses we offer by online. We may call it blended learning. Previously, we learned about the term blended learning, but COVID-19 situations learned us how to use blended learning. However, BAU and many other universities have IT facilities which need to be strengthened. We are working on it to mitigate this problem. And COVID-19 situations learn us that we have to prepare ourselves for any other uh, adverse circumstances. We should offer course by online around the year. Recently, our students, we are trying to keep the students engaged with online academic activities still now, because I think we need to prepare ourselves uh, for for the what I would like to say. We need to prepare ourselves. We need to technologically sound. We need to be and I think we can do for our students. We need to engage our students. That's it.
Thanks, Masuma. Yes, engaging students is going to be key to all of this. Thank you to all three of you for your perspectives over the last couple of years and how your universities have dealt with the challenges that the country has faced. And as I mentioned at the outset, this is clearly an issue that universities worldwide have faced. In the next question, again to all of you, I'd like to look more broadly outside of the purely COVID-19 related impact and look at the challenges or the barriers that quality higher education in Bangladesh has. So the question again to all of you is, what do you see as the single biggest barrier to quality in higher education in Bangladesh? This can be at a macro policy level. This can also be at an institutional level. It's a case of what do you see as the greatest barrier to quality in higher education in Bangladesh? So Sabitha, back over to you again, please.
Okay, thank you, David. And indeed, it is important for us to think about the barriers when we talk about the quality higher education. When the institutes like University of Dhaka, we have good quality teachers. If you want to take our teaching and learning to a great condition from the good condition, you really have to focus on the barriers we have. So the barriers in public universities, might be similar for other public universities also. It is, if you want to know about one thing that could, what the barrier could be, I would say the main barrier is, or the main obstacle is our insufficient asset or resources. It is the tendency to spend less public money for the public universities. And I think when we have the best of the best students and the best teachers available, if we had little more resources and if we had sufficient assets like labs, libraries, and then internet facilities, and the logistics supports like computers and laptops, then our students could give so much better to the nation. And we always produce good quality graduates. But to give and to get involved with technology, you really need to have the resources also. So I think this is the point where the University Grants Commission can take a good role. And I know that they are taking role in generating student loan and providing a loan for buying laptops and mobile apps. But for the COVID situation this year, we were not prepared. So the whole process, the budgeting, everything takes time. And now the students would probably have better option to get available resources. But this is one obstacle. There are other obstacles also. But since you wanted to know the one prime obstacle, I would say it's the resource. And I would like to add also that it would be the teachers and students, their asset, the most important assets we have.
Yes, a very interesting point and a very relevant one as well, I think. Resources are clearly expensive, and if you've got large numbers of students, then it's a large investment for any university or any government to be making. And clearly, university needs to have up-to-date resources as well, so it's an ongoing expenditure that needs to be factored in. And this is perhaps an area where the British Council may have at least part of the solution, insofar as we have our digital library, which we are running globally, and that has access to many different resources, not only books, but also academic journals and magazines and resource materials that could be useful in an academic setting as well. So that's certainly something that we can pick up with the university and indeed with the University Grants Commission in future discussions. So thanks for raising that one. Tariq, coming back to you, what do you see as the greatest single barrier in higher education in Bangladesh?
Well, David, that's a pretty broad question, I must say. And I definitely should agree with Dr. Sabitha, as she was saying that resource is a big problem. The public money is less encouraged to be used for the public, you know, and so the priority is that you spend less public money. And if you are spending less public money, then the question comes, where does the money come from, right? What are the alternative sources? And when we ask this question, we mostly cannot answer this, right? And for the private universities, this is even greater problem, that most of the private universities can't offer PhDs. So we actually offer undergrads. And undergrads, they don't really do research. They are mostly, get taught some of the courses. Now, if you want us to do research, if the state wants us to do research, then the question comes in that where do we get the money? Because we are getting money from the student tuition fees, and they don't need research because they are doing undergrad courses, master's courses. So you see the gap that we have the need, but then we don't have the answer of the question where the money comes from for research. And I would say this is one of the big issue. Then when we talk about the quality, how we define quality. Nowadays, our most used definition of quality is that how you are doing research. But then one of the other aspect that we are actually failing to recognize is that how the higher education is actually serving the social needs. And when you talk about quality, that needs to be addressed, that whether higher education is serving the social need, right? Recently, that there was an incident in Buet, and there was a big discussion that how the technical universities are actually failing to teach the students about the patience, the empathy, the history and culture of the society. And people are involved in politics, and it's good that students are involved in politics, but the politics that we want, the politics that is coming from 52, 71, and the politics now resulting such murder is not the same thing. So certainly we see that higher education institutions, and specifically and mostly the technical ones, they are missing one very important aspect, or the definition of quality is that it should serve the societal needs. Not only like you create technical people, but also the social dilemma, social needs. So we are missing that from the quality definition. And also when we talk about quality, we are also missing the entrepreneurial preparedness. So that probably another big discussion. I'm not going to go in detail right now, but employability, then the sustainable development goals, these needs to be added in our quality definition. But we are only focusing and mostly focusing on research. So we need to broaden our definition of quality, and that's how our strategic goals needs to be reorganized. Which definitely we are somehow lacking. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Tariq. You raised some very interesting points, and indeed the role of higher education and universities in society in a country, the very sort of foundation of what a higher education should be doing in the country. Is it focused on developing citizens for the country, or is it focused on more economically focused goals around preparing people to provide to the economy, and so very fundamental issues that have been grappled with by many countries globally and are still being grappled with, but clearly the focus globally seems to be very much at the moment on aligning universities with economic goals, and so that clearly has an agenda. How that works with the broader social goals is an interesting question, and one I think we could debate for many hours and probably not necessarily come up with a solution. So we'll leave that one tonight. Thank you. Masuma, again, from your perspective in Mymensingh, what do you see as the greatest single barrier to higher education in Bangladesh? Masuma, you're on mute, I think. Easily done.
Can you hear
now
me,
I think
please?
we have Masuma. Yes,
Thank you.
now we have you back again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your important question. Quality education is the demand of the era. There is no alternative of quality education for the development of the nation. This is very vital and urgent issue. In my opinion, the most important one is the barrier is absence of training institute for the university teachers. We know there are a good number of training institutes for the primary, secondary, and even college teachers in our country, but there is not a single training institute for our tertiary level education providers. I mean, for the university teachers. Why there is no training institute? The obvious answer is that we fail to realize that the university academicians need formal training on pedagogy. We thought that the university teachers are meritorious and talented. As such, they do not require any training. It was our assumption that the newly recruits of the university will acquire pedagogical procedure spontaneously. Yes, we have seen that a small number of academicians do well in classroom teaching. This is an exceptional matter. Like school and college teachers, our newly recruited university teachers also need comprehensive knowledge and skill on teaching learning discipline. Fortunately, under the financial support of University Grants Commission, particularly through HECE project, a limited number of young teachers, say lecturer and assistant professors, had the opportunity to receive short training on pedagogical procedures in their respective universities. So far, we know the trained teachers are performing well in uh, doing research, writing, and publishing high-quality research papers in high-impact journal. GTI of BAU has been working in collaboration with UGC for implementing foundation training courses for public university teachers since 2007, but limited in number. GTI has successfully completed 25th foundation training. At present, 26th foundation training is going on at GTI. Each batch consists of 25 participants from different public universities. Approximately 700 newly recruited lecturer and assistant professor got the training. To meet up this demand, GTI tries to modernize and extend training facilities. As there is no other place for faculty training in Bangladesh, GTI has been the pioneer of faculty training courses in Bangladesh. Another, if I would mention about only one thing that I would like to mention it about the training institute, and I think it's all right. It's from my side. That's it.
Thank you very much, Masuma, and a very important point you make in terms of faculty development, faculty training, pre-service training, and ongoing in-service training for faculty through their academic life. And indeed, it's an area that we, the British Council, are very keen to be engaged in, and an area that we have worked on as part of the Centres of Excellence for Teaching and Learning. I think in our discussions with the Ministry of Education, with the Secretary, with the UGC and the various senior members within UGC, there is a recognition that this is an area that needs improvement. And I believe that in future reforms, this is likely to be an area that will be focused on. And so a very important point that you make. It leads very nicely into the next question that I wanted to ask Tarek. We have spoken in my introduction a little about the Centres of Excellence for Teaching and Learning. And this was designed as a pilot initially to demonstrate how faculty could be developed. And obviously we have here this evening two directors for the settled Centres of Excellence for Teaching and Learning. So Tarek, could you just briefly tell our viewers this evening around a little bit about how the centre works, what you do, what kind of training you do, and provide an insight into how effective you think it might be. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Uh, that's an excellent question in terms of understanding broadly about Settle. I think what we do in Settle, so I will divide this answer into two different parts. So first part, I will recognize how Settle is responding to the current scenario when we are talking about the pandemic and all these, ups and downs. So in Settle at ULab, what we are trying to do, we are trying to have regular conversation about the pandemic and as its impact on the teaching and learning. And by that, what I mean, the regular conversation is that apart from different workshops, apart from surveys, apart from policy formulation, this conversation is important, and this is happening very regularly to understand the broader picture that how COVID actually changing the broader landscape of higher education, right? So the policies are changing. UGC is shifting from one mode to another mode. We are trying to incorporate blended learning, and then blended learning is just one concept. If you want to execute blended learning, you need to have lots of structural changes. You need to understand that there is a pedagogic change as well. So I would say that apart from organizing different, professional development session, these conversations are making us more sensitive and aware about how we can better look into these concepts. So, for example, when you talk about blended learning, I'm just trying to give one example. Um, there is a very common scenario or discussion that we should move to blended learning, and everybody is agreeing, right? But then again, when you are discussing what exactly or how we understand blended learning, I have seen people talking about blended learning is just about giving a bit of education through online and giving a bit of education through face to face because you are introducing online teaching. So that's pretty much sums up what is blended learning. But then as a education major and coming from an education stream, I see blended learning is a whole lot of change. Even the pedagogy is changing, curriculum design will be changed, new courses will come in, your mission vision probably will change, and these are the some of the aspects that is not possible to cover by one or two PD sessions, right? You need a constant conversation with different stakeholder, UGC, British Council, who are actually working on these different aspects. So in terms of professional development, student nurturing, well-being, lots of components are there where we are actually trying to engage our settle and try to take inputs and give inputs. So roughly, if I need to sum up, that is one aspect to tackle the COVID scenario. But other than that, in terms of um, serve the need of the academics, because Settle basically support the academics, their professional development. Here as well, I would say that our strategy is a bit different because in our Settle, we, apart from different technical aspects, LMS, those are the trainings we have in one side. But we also see there is a culture in our country that in the higher education scenario, you don't really want to develop yourself much. Because if you are a secondary school teacher, if you're a primary school teacher, if you are being told to go to a training session, you go there because you see that you still need to learn some of the stuff. But when you are a faculty academic at the university, you feel like you have a PhD. And I'm not talking about the general people. Of course, there are exceptions. But mostly we have a culture that we see that university academics, they know pretty much what they need to do. And sometimes this becomes an issue because we see some sort of resistance as well. And I'm talking about the broader picture, the culture of professional development. So we are also working and organizing different kind of discussion, roundtable seminars to kind of sensitize the local academics to see that still we need to know how to teach better You maybe have expertise on microbiology or English, but teaching is a different skill set, and it has different pedagogy. So if you really want to be an excellent teacher, you need to equip them, right? So I would say in a nutshell that sensitizing our academics is a big part as well that ULAB Settle is working on. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Tarek. Interesting to hear what you say. And just reflecting on a seminar that I recently took part in that was organized by the UN across South Asia and East Asia, looking at education returning back to operation after the pandemic. One of the key messages that came out of that was that digital technology is an assistance, but it is not necessarily the answer to all of the problems that education might be facing at the moment. And clearly it's not a quick fix either. And so I think we need to recognize that moving to blended or to online is something that takes time. There needs to be the infrastructure in place, both for the universities, but also for the students. It needs to be affordable for students to be able to engage in that kind of technology as well. All very relevant points. I'm going to jump ahead to a question that links back to something that you said before. Employability is a question that comes up, and clearly the government has a very strong focus on higher education, as we discussed before, and its links, or education and its links towards the economic goals that the country has set itself for development, very ambitious goals that the country has set itself. But what we see is that large numbers of graduates come out every year and are unable to find work or meaningful work in the areas that they've been studying in. And so how a question to an open question to anyone who wants to pick this one up, how do you think higher education can be better aligned to the labor market or to the demands of the economy? Who would like to pick that question up?
David, I can go if there is no Dr. Sabitha, you want to go
Tarek, over to you.
Yeah. I can also take the question. It's up to David. No problem.
Right. I think we don't have a lot of time.
Then.
Yeah, let's go with Dr. Sabitha.
Okay, thank you. It is an important question, and I was thinking back in my mind that why so many graduates, talented students from our university, we call them brain drain. You know, it's about employability, but I think we need to have some assessments also on the need of your society. Like, we produce more graduate, more masters, but we do not think about the employability sites where we need, like maybe we need more vocational institutes, and we need to give hands-on training for the job sectors where we have work. And if the graduates from a university, if they had their employability, then they wouldn't go abroad for work, and they wouldn't search work in different countries. And we are losing the students, the brains. And I think to overcome such problems, it is a broad question, but if we had the industry academia linkage, where in your universities, higher education institutes, the industry would come and they would offer you with their demand, what they need from the university, and what sort of demand is there in the society for job market. And then we can learn more about what sort of graduates to produce. And we mostly tend to be concerned about the taught courses, the theoretical courses, and not practical oriented or soft skill courses. And when we focus more on soft skills, and we focus more on innovations, and it is all about university teaching. University teaching is like, it is for you to create knowledge, to generate knowledge and innovations, and find your graduates to a place where they can take your nation to a better position. And that is what quality is about. So I think we need to change our mindset also, and not stick to taught courses, and think more about what is the demand in the society and what sort of graduates we need to produce more.
David, if
Thank you.
I can jump
All
in.
relevant points. Yeah, please go ahead, Tarek.
Well, I'll be very quick. I, to some extent, agree with Dr. Sabitha, and to some extent, I disagree. One of the argument is going on recently that we are producing too many graduates, which are wastage of the resources. I agree to that, and I also disagree to that. I agree in a sense that we don't really have a clear mapping, and Dr. Sabitha actually highlighted that, which is very, very important. But then again, I disagree because um, if we have lots of graduates and there is a market, we shouldn't just stick to our local market. We should also explore the global market, and this market is pretty large. So if you have a nice little curriculum mapping and the job market analysis to understand that where we can place our graduates in terms of the global market, you then have a placement of your extra large number of graduates. Like, think about the current scenario. We are sending our unskilled people to abroad, and they are used as a cheap labor, and that's probably one of the greatest earning source of our GDP. Now, if we think about that in terms of skilled labor forces, then that is huge. It's just we don't have a very clever sort of mapping. And the next thing I would like to emphasize on is that our prime minister all the time keeps saying that don't just wait for somebody will give you a job, but then you create job. Now, my question would be that whether we have a proper assessment that how much our universities are prepared to produce more entrepreneurs, right? And there's a whole lot of literature, there are scales, there are indicators to measure that, whether you are actually, or university is actually capable enough to produce efficient entrepreneurs. So we are saying that, but we are not doing the work to produce more entrepreneurs, to create more jobs. So this has to be taken on board as a strategic issue, both from the ministry and the UGC and British Council and the universities and all the stakeholders. There needs to be a bigger vision and a mission and strategic plan. But our discussion is stuck on to the point that we need more entrepreneurs. But we are not going to this next phase to see how much we are doing, how our performance is in terms of making more entrepreneurs. So these are just 2 points I want to make, and of course we can go on and on to discuss this issue. So thank you, David, for the question.
Thanks, Tarek. Yes, all relevant points, and particularly the point about entrepreneurialism. An interesting point about overseas markets as well. Clearly, Bangladesh has a lot of people overseas already, but as you say, very often at the sort of lower end of the labour market. I just want to pick up on a question that has come through in the chat from Ashraf Islam, and he's asked about what priorities universities should focus on to improve quality in education. And he's listed a couple of ideas, such as upgrading the curriculum, teaching methodology, research culture, changes in the administrative mindset, potentially policy there. All of those areas are probably areas that need attention. I suppose if there was a priority, which one would you see as a priority? Masuma, if I could come to you first on this, which do you think would be a priority, particularly for improving quality in education in Bangladesh?
I think, in my opinion, if I stated it before that the barriers and obstacles, one of the obstacles about the training, so I should say like this: how to mitigate the problem. Then, in my opinion, I think the young teachers should be put under probationary for 2 to 3 years. During this period, they must receive pedagogical training and show their teaching competencies as per required standard. No lecturer should be promoted to the next teaching rank without pedagogical training. There should be adequate provision for the junior teachers to undergo pedagogical training in their own university or outside institutions like GTI, BAU, Mymensingh. Um, Teaching performances of the university teachers must be monitored and assessed as per approved and standard procedures. A regular follow-up seminar refreshers training should be arranged for the junior teachers. I think it could be helpful um, uh, to develop our teaching learning situation in our country. Thank you.
Thanks. All very relevant, and again comes back to faculty development. Sabitha, just coming back to you, in terms of prioritization of some of these issues that Ashraf has highlighted, curriculum, methodology, research, administrative policy changes, where do you see the priorities?
Thank you, David. I wouldn't like to focus on a priority issue. It is all a package. Like when you are talking about curriculum and pedagogy and teachers training and working on the ethical aspects of teachers and teaching learning, you need to have it as a wholesome thing to work on. And we have in Dhaka University, in the University of Dhaka, we run different training modules for research methodologies and project proposal writings and teaching methods. And now we are so much concerned. Previously, it was like teachers to students teaching method. And now we focus on outcome-based education, and it's student-centered education. So it is more interactive. We continuously learn from the books we read, from the classes we take, from our students also. We learn from their lackings also. So we learn that why they're taking time to learn or why they're lagging behind in learning. That is also a learning process for the teachers. And we run relevant IT skill courses and teaching pedagogy courses, curriculum, training workshops. They're all important. All together, you can take the teaching learning to a different quality in a height where you can be proud of the quality of your higher education institute.
Thank you very much, Sabitha. It's difficult to prioritize when potentially all of those areas need some work. And let's hope that in future reforms and future changes that the UGC, the ministry, also take these on board, along with other funding agencies. I know the World Bank and Asian Development Bank are also intimately involved or closely involved with discussions with the ministry around reform programs as well. I think we're getting very close to the end of our session, and so we're going to have to wrap up this evening. I'd like to thank our three guests very much for joining. It's been very interesting to hear your perspectives from both the private and the public domain, and from Dhaka and from outside of Dhaka perspectives, and hear your experiences through the last couple of years, and how you've managed to deal with these, and ways in which the universities that you work within are taking things forward. I'm reassured that despite all of the challenges that we face, that there is a lot of will to improve the quality of education, and so I'm hopeful that things will improve, and that the quality of education in Bangladesh will be better in the future as we come out of this pandemic. But it's going to take a concerted effort from all of the stakeholders involved, and it's good to have the thoughts of the three of you to know that you and your universities are on board with this. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you indeed also to the Daily Star for providing this platform for us to discuss this evening around higher education issues. Thanks to my British Council colleagues for setting this up. It's taken quite a bit of work to get this up and running. And indeed, thanks to all of you out there for watching and listening this evening. And please do keep comments coming. Keep liking the sites. We will be running more of these sessions in the future. on different aspects of higher education, international higher education, as well as higher education in Bangladesh. So please do stay tuned to both Daily Star and to British Council Facebook pages to have a look at upcoming sessions, and please do join us in the future. So finally, from me and from the British Council, thank you all for joining and have a very pleasant evening. Thank you. Good night.